Ignoring someone doesn't just hurt their feelings, it rewires their behavior, and that's what most people misunderstand. We assume confrontation changes people, explanations, arguments, emotional conversations, but the human brain reacts far more strongly to absence than to words. When attention is removed, something primal activates. Confusion replaces certainty, control disappears, and the mind starts searching for answers it didn't need when access was guaranteed. This isn't about manipulation or cruelty, it's about how humans are wired to respond to social feedback. Attention rewards behavior, reaction reinforces it, and silence interrupts the entire loop. That's why people often change after they're ignored, not after they're confronted. Not because silence is powerful on its own, but because the brain hates unanswered signals. Today we're going to break down why ignoring someone alters their actions, their emotions, and their perception of you, and why it works even when nothing else does. Being ignored doesn't just register as rudeness. To the human brain, it registers as danger. Long before modern relationships, social belonging was tied directly to survival. Being excluded from the group meant loss of protection, resources, and safety. That wiring never disappeared. It evolved. When someone suddenly stops responding, the brain doesn't process it calmly. It activates the same neural pathways associated with physical pain and threat detection. This is why being ignored feels disproportionately intense. There's no clear explanation, no closure, no signal of what went wrong. And uncertainty is more stressful than bad news. From a psychological perspective, attention functions as confirmation of relevance. As long as someone reacts to you, even negatively, your position feels secure. Ignoring removes that confirmation. The mind immediately starts asking questions. Did I do something wrong? Did I lose value? Am I being replaced? That internal questioning is what drives behavioral change. Unlike confrontation, which allows people to defend themselves, ignoring offers no feedback to argue against. There's nothing to push back on, no accusation to deny, no explanation to reframe. The mind is forced inward instead of outward. This is why ignoring someone often leads them to self-correct, reflect, or escalate their effort. They are not responding to punishment, they're responding to loss of certainty. The brain seeks to restore equilibrium, and the fastest way to do that is by changing behavior to regain access. Importantly, this reaction isn't conscious. People don't decide to feel unsettled when ignored. They are unsettled. The nervous system interprets silence as social instability and demands resolution. That's the core reason ignoring someone has such a strong effect. It bypasses ego. It bypasses argument. And it speaks directly to the part of the brain that cannot tolerate unanswered signals. Certainty is comfort. As long as someone knows where they stand with you, their behavior stays stable. Even conflict provides certainty. Arguments, explanations, and emotional reactions all send a clear signal. You still matter enough to engage. Ignoring removes that signal entirely. When attention is withdrawn, predictability collapses. The person no longer knows what to expect, how to respond, or how they're being evaluated. And the human brain is deeply uncomfortable with ambiguity. It constantly tries to close open loops. This is why ignoring someone doesn't produce calm detachment on their side. It produces mental activity. They replay past interactions. They analyze tone, timing, and wording. They search for meaning in silence. The lack of feedback forces the mind to generate its own explanations, and those explanations are often harsher than reality. Self-doubt increases. Anxiety fills the gaps. Uncertainty also shifts power dynamics. When attention is guaranteed, behavior doesn't need adjustment. Access feels secure, but when access becomes uncertain, effort increases. People become more attentive, more cautious, or more reactive because they're trying to restore predictability. This is the opposite of what happens during confrontation. Confrontation gives clarity. It defines the problem. It creates boundaries to push against. Ignoring removes the structure entirely. There's nothing to argue with, only a void to interpret. That void forces adaptation. Some people become more polite, some become more apologetic, some escalate with messages or attempts to reconnect. Different reactions, same cause. The need to resolve uncertainty. This is why ignoring someone often changes behavior faster than long conversations ever could. The brain prioritizes certainty over pride. It will sacrifice ego to regain clarity. Silence doesn't explain, it destabilizes. And when certainty is removed, behavior is almost always the first thing to change. because changing behavior feels like the quickest path back to psychological safety. Most people believe change happens through confrontation. You explain how you feel, you point out what went wrong, you expect understanding to lead to adjustment. Psychologically, this sounds reasonable. In practice, it rarely works the way we hope. Confrontation activates defense, not reflection. The moment someone feels accused, even gently, their brain shifts into protection mode. They stop listening for understanding and start listening for threats. Instead of asking, "What did I do?" they ask, "How do I defend myself?" The conversation becomes about preserving self-image, not correcting behavior. This is why explanations often lead to arguments, not because the point is wrong, but because ego is now involved. When confronted, people externalize responsibility. They justify, they minimize, they redirect blame. Even if they apologize, the apology often serves to end discomfort rather than signal genuine change. The behavior may pause temporarily, but the underlying pattern remains intact. Ignoring bypasses this entire mechanism. Silence doesn't accuse, it doesn't label, it doesn't give the other person something to push against. There's no clear narrative to defend or distort. Without confrontation, the ego has nothing to fight, so the mind turns inward instead of outward. This inward turn is where change begins. Instead of rehearsing counter-arguments, the person is left alone with uncertainty. They are forced to sit with unanswered questions rather than rebut accusations. That discomfort creates space for self-evaluation that confrontation rarely achieves. Another reason confrontation fails is predictability. Once someone knows you'll always explain, argue, or chase resolution, your reactions become part of the pattern. They adapt to your words without changing their actions. Ignoring breaks predictability. It removes the expected response and disrupts the behavioral script. And when the script breaks, awareness increases. This doesn't mean confrontation is always wrong. It means confrontation alone rarely changes deeply ingrained behavior. Silence works differently, not by persuading, but by interrupting the psychological loop that keeps behavior stable. And interruption, not explanation, is often what finally forces change. Human behavior follows reinforcement. What gets rewarded gets repeated. What loses its reward slowly fades. Most people don't realize how often their reactions, even negative ones, are reinforcing the very behavior they want to stop. Attention is the reward. When someone acts out, disrespects boundaries, or behaves inconsistently, any emotional response keeps the loop alive. Arguments, explanations, frustration, even disappointment all signal engagement. The behavior still produces a result, and the brain remembers results. Ignoring removes the reward entirely. Without reaction, there's no emotional payoff, no validation, no confirmation that the behavior had impact. The loop breaks, and when a loop breaks, the brain is forced to reassess its strategy. This is why some behaviors intensify briefly after being ignored. The brain is testing, it escalates to see if the reward returns. More messages, more effort, more emotion. This isn't strength, it's withdrawal from reinforcement. If attention still doesn't return, the brain adapts. It learns that the old behavior no longer works, and once a behavior stops producing results, it loses value. People don't change because they're convinced. They change because the outcome changed. Confrontation often strengthens reward loops by accident. It provides stimulation. Ignoring removes stimulation completely. That absence forces the nervous system to down-regulate and search for new approaches. This is why silence feels powerful. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's neutral. It doesn't punish, it doesn't reward, it simply stops participating. And when participation ends, so does reinforcement. That's the hidden mechanism most people miss. Ignoring doesn't win, it teaches. It teaches the brain that access is conditional, not guaranteed. And once access is no longer automatic, behavior adjusts to earn it back, or it fades away entirely. When someone is ignored, the noise around them disappears, and what remains is their own inner dialogue. This is where the real shift begins. Without external feedback, distraction, or emotional exchange, the mind turns inward. And most people aren't comfortable there. Conversation keeps people oriented outward. It gives them something to react to, argue against, or emotionally regulate through. Silence removes that outlet. There's no one to blame, no immediate reassurance, no response to reinterpret, just unanswered space. That space invites self-examination. Questions begin forming naturally. Did I cross a line? Did I take something for granted? Did I misread the situation? These questions rarely appear during confrontation because confrontation keeps attention external. Silence redirects it inward. This is why ignoring someone often leads to delayed realizations rather than immediate reactions. Reflection takes time. It happens when the nervous system settles enough to process uncertainty instead of fighting it. Importantly, this reflection isn't guided by you. That's what makes it effective. When you explain yourself, you frame the narrative. The other person can reject it, distort it, or dismiss it. When silence is present, the mind constructs its own narrative, and people are far more influenced by conclusions they reach themselves than by ones handed to them. This internal processing can lead to accountability, adjustment, or acceptance. Sometimes people recognize their behavior and correct it. Other times they realize the connection no longer serves them. Both outcomes are forms of change. Silence doesn't demand insight, it creates the conditions for it. Not everyone reflects deeply. Some avoid introspection entirely. But those who do often experience shifts that no conversation could have produced. Because silence doesn't argue, it doesn't persuade, it simply removes distraction. And in that quiet, people are left with the one voice they can't escape, their own. Access is power, even when people don't realize they're relying on it. As long as someone has consistent access to your attention, emotions, or availability, the relationship feels stable. Behavior doesn't need to change because nothing is at risk. Ignoring removes that access. When access disappears, the balance shifts immediately. The person who was once reacting now becomes the one being evaluated. The one who assumed availability is forced to reconsider their position. This isn't dominance, it's recalibration. Power in human relationships isn't about control, it's about who needs who more in that moment. Ignoring reduces visible need. And when need decreases on one side, leverage increases, not through manipulation, but through independence. This is why people often behave better after being ignored. They sense that access is no longer guaranteed, and when something valuable becomes conditional, behavior adapts to protect it. Loss of access also breaks entitlement. When someone assumes you'll always respond, always explain, always be there, that assumption shapes how they treat you. Ignoring interrupts entitlement without confrontation. It quietly redefines boundaries. Importantly, this shift happens even if nothing is said. The absence itself communicates. Things have changed. That message is far more powerful than a verbal warning because it's experienced, not debated. There's no room to negotiate meaning. The nervous system registers the shift immediately. Some people respond by becoming more respectful, some by withdrawing, some by escalating effort. All of these responses indicate the same thing: the dynamic has changed. Ignoring doesn't take power. It reveals where power actually was, and once access is no longer automatic, behavior has to adjust to the new reality. Because relationships don't run on words. They run on availability, attention, and the conditions under which both are given. Not everyone reacts to being ignored the same way. For some, it's uncomfortable but manageable. For others, it triggers intense anxiety, urgency, or even desperation. The difference lies in attachment patterns. People with anxious attachment rely heavily on external reassurance to regulate their emotions. Attention confirms safety. Responsiveness confirms value. When that reassurance disappears, their nervous system interprets it as abandonment, not distance. This is why ignoring someone with anxious attachment often leads to escalated behavior. Multiple messages, emotional appeals, apologies that come too fast, promises that feel rushed. Their behavior isn't manipulation, it's panic. Avoidantly attached individuals react differently. They may appear unaffected on the surface, but internally they register the loss as well. Instead of chasing, they withdraw further. Silence reinforces their belief that closeness is unreliable, so they protect themselves by disengaging. In both cases, ignoring forces a reaction. It surfaces underlying patterns that were previously hidden by routine interaction. This is one of the reasons ignoring reveals more about someone than confrontation ever could. Healthy attachment responds differently. A secure person notices the distance, reflects, and adjusts without panic or withdrawal. They respect the boundary, they self-regulate. Their behavior changes calmly rather than reactively. This distinction matters. Ignoring doesn't create insecurity, it exposes it. The reaction tells you more about the person than the silence ever could. It shows how they handle uncertainty, loss of access, and emotional discomfort. This is why ignoring often feels like a turning point. It doesn't just change behavior, it clarifies compatibility. Some people rise to the moment, some unravel, some walk away. All of those outcomes provide information, and information is the real value of silence. Not control, not punishment, but clarity about who you're actually dealing with. Ignoring someone only becomes manipulation when it's used to control rather than to protect. That distinction is critical. Silence used as a boundary is fundamentally different from silence used as punishment. Manipulation seeks a specific outcome. It withholds attention to provoke guilt, fear, or compliance. Boundary setting withdraws attention to preserve emotional health. The behavior may look similar on the surface, but the intention changes everything. When ignoring is healthy, it isn't performative. There's no checking to see if the other person noticed, no waiting for a reaction, no internal countdown. The silence exists because engagement is no longer safe, productive, or aligned. This kind of silence is stable. Manipulative ignoring is unstable. It's charged with expectation. The person ignoring is still emotionally entangled, still monitoring, still hoping for a response. That tension leaks through behavior eventually and erodes trust. Healthy ignoring, by contrast, releases control. It accepts whatever outcome follows, reconnection, adjustment, or separation. The silence isn't leverage, it's clarity. This is why ignoring works best when it isn't meant to work at all. When your goal is self-regulation rather than behavior modification, silence becomes clean. It doesn't escalate conflict, it doesn't create resentment. It simply changes the conditions of interaction. People sense this difference instinctively. They respond differently to silence that is grounded versus silence that is strategic. Ignoring isn't about making someone feel small, it's about making space for respect. And respect can't be forced. It only emerges when boundaries are real. Not performed, not threatened, but quietly upheld without explanation. Ignoring isn't a universal solution. Used in the wrong context, with the wrong person, or for the wrong reason, it can do more harm than good. Understanding when silence backfires is just as important as knowing why it works. Ignoring fails when the other person is already emotionally detached. In these cases, silence doesn't trigger reflection or adjustment. It confirms disinterest. There's no internal conflict to resolve because the bond is already loosened. The result isn't change, it's disappearance. It also backfires with people who lack emotional awareness. Some individuals don't interpret silence as a signal. They don't reflect, they don't adjust. They simply move on without processing what happened. Expecting growth from someone who avoids introspection leads to disappointment. Another risk appears when ignoring replaces communication entirely. Silence is powerful as a pause, not as a permanent strategy. When used excessively, it can create confusion instead of clarity. Healthy relationships still require dialogue, just not reactive dialogue. Ignoring can also escalate conflict if the other person interprets it as disrespect rather than boundary. Cultural context, personality, and history all matter. What feels like calm distance to one person may feel like hostility to another. This is why intention alone isn't enough. Awareness matters. Silence should be proportional. It should match the situation, not overpower it. When silence is used to avoid responsibility, accountability erodes. When it's used to punish, resentment grows. The key question is simple. Is silence creating clarity, or is it creating damage? If it leads to self-reflection, behavioral adjustment, or respectful distance, it's working. If it leads to confusion, escalation, or emotional shutdown, it's not. Ignoring isn't about winning, it's about alignment. And when alignment isn't possible, silence doesn't fix the relationship. It reveals that it was already broken.